think about the silos that we work in, we're losing the huge opportunity that comes when we start seeing that these things are interconnected, and the social tissue that binds them is this concept of worker leadership.
My name is Madelyn Edlin. I am the marketing and sales manager here at EFI. Today, we get the awesome privilege of sitting down in front of our imaginary fireplace with Kenton Harmer. Kenton is EFI's managing director, handling standards, policies, and relationships that make up EFI. He heads up EFI's program to mitigate forced labor in the agricultural supply chain. Plus, he makes sure we all stay on track by measuring EFI's impact. Kenton, thank you so much for taking time to sit down with us today. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to talking about what worker-led means to you and diving a little bit more into that topic.
Great, yeah, let's go. This is such a great conversation for us to be having both internally and externally.
Yeah, internal education for us and hopefully some external education for everybody else. So, softball to warm you up. Explain to me in your words what worker-led means to you.
Yeah, so I love this question because I had to sit with this for a while and realize that there was some dissonance I was feeling around the concept of worker-led, even though it's one that we really lead with at EFI. And where I landed is that the way I think about the concept is not as being worker-led, but as being worker leadership.
Okay.
So just kind of expanding the word out a little bit, and I want to just sort of unpack that a little bit because it was just kind of a fascinating thought process for me to be sitting with. It's giving workers the lane, the freedom, the skills, and the ability and the incentives to show leadership, particularly on initially problem identification.
Okay.
So if they see a small thing, do they have the ability to identify that as a small problem that can be solved, and really sort of show leadership in identifying problems. And then we go all the way over to then the implementation of whatever organizational response is appropriate, is again being able to bring worker leadership into that. It just means that the changes that are being made, and they're usually being made by the workers themselves, is they're going to be better at solving the problem. So I'm really, through this process of getting ready for this conversation with you, Madelyn, is really interested in this concept of worker leadership, and just sort of one of the nuances as to why that seems to be more precise than worker-led is what happens in between that problem identification and that organizational response. And that's the whole process of generating solutions and deciding on solutions. I would opine that we actually don't want that to be worker-led, and we don't want that to be management-led, which it historically always has been. We actually want that to be a very authentic collaboration space where both workers and management can show leadership, bring that leadership to the room, but really that have a collaborative and effective structure that then generates the options, decides on the options. And so I want us to, in some ways at EFI, to be thinking about either adding the caveats or thinking or communicating slightly different about what we mean by worker-led, and really be thinking about worker leadership and how that fits into a larger collaborative model.
Because really, we're setting the table for this collaboration and handing off tools.
That's right. Yeah, we don't do the collaboration, obviously, but there are skills and power setting or power speaking and identifying power and leveling the room, and there's a lot that needs to go in where true leadership from workers in particular can be expressed, and it can be brought into the operational practices and the iterations and problem solving and all the things that can happen on a farm. But yeah, we don't do that work. We try and create the room and the people and prepare them to do that work.
So, as you mentioned before, traditionally it's been management led. We're kind of breaking that down. Why would a grower care to bring in this kind of reform, this kind of idea of worker led, worker leadership?
Yeah. First, I mean, we always at EFI, we've got to realize how scary this can be.
Yeah.
This is not the way that many agricultural workplaces have been managed historically. But the value proposition for taking on this work, I think there's two in particular reasons where growers really see a benefit, and it's the concept of the proximity, right? Who is closest to the problem?
Yeah.
Workers in most cases, right? Those that are closer are going to see it the soonest, right? So we can start solving small problems before they become big problems.
Right.
And then we go all the way back over, as using my right hand before, is to talk about the response. Then is the responses are likely to be more effective, more highly adopted, more thought through, less likely to have negative externalities if there's some collaboration and leadership by the workers in both creating those solutions and then implementing them amongst their peers. So I think this model of really creating lanes for worker leadership ends up having the most benefit. And we could argue about most, because we see huge benefits to workers too, just in how they think about their work and how they think about their profession. But we see huge benefit. We see really interesting benefits to the employers themselves of having this type of culture where this kind of collaboration, this kind of leadership is proactively encouraged.
So you touched on it a little bit of why a worker, on the other hand, would care beyond just worker satisfaction. Why would a worker care to sit down and put in maybe a little bit of extra effort and thought at their job?
Yeah, it's the right question, and I think it has layers to the answer.
Okay.
So, and the first one is, I think we all have to be careful about bringing our assumptions to why workers would do this into the conversation. I think we all can develop the muscle further where let's actually ask the workers what their motivations are, what their incentive structures are, because they're going to bring things to the conversation that we're not including in our own assumptions of that. And I'll just riff on that a little bit, because we saw that really play out in a fascinating way in 2016 when we had something called the Shared Values Summit. We brought in, I believe it was 35 workers from 3 countries, maybe 4 countries, management teams from certified farms. We brought them to Costco headquarters, and we included very senior leadership of Costco and Whole Foods, what we called the Shared Values Summit. And that the primary sort of study question, if you will, of that summit was, these workers are creating additional value in the system for some of the reasons we've talked about already.
Right.
How should we be compensating them? And I think a lot of us went in thinking this is going to be 3 days of chasing a number or chasing a set of numbers. What's the minimum wage? What's the piece rate? What's the bonus? And we had that conversation, and comp is important to workers, but it's not their only lens that they look at.
Yeah.
how they want to be given value back. And what we started to hear, which was a surprise and a really delightful surprise, was the importance of hard benefits. So things that you would expect to get at a professional work site, like dental, like vision, like retirement, but also soft benefits. And that's a bit of a sloppy word, but the importance of their voice being valued, the
Okay.
importance of dignity, the importance of feeling like they were part of a valuable profession. It was the workers that brought those into the conversation and really challenged us to say, how do we amplify those things so they get additional value
Mm,
from being on an EFI certified farm through some of these modalities.
right.
So and I'm going to go long on this one if you don't mind, because I think this
Go
is just
for it.
really important too, and it goes back to motivations and incentives,
Okay.
right? Because that's what drives behavior.
Mhm.
Often, what we need is a behavior change somewhere in the system, if not multiple places in the system, in order for us not to keep repeating the same problems that we've historically repeated.
Sure.
And so in talking to workers really about what their motivations and their incentives are, becomes really important, because I think what we're learning every time we do that is there's a whole set of things that have never been considered before. Multi-generational trauma,
Mm,
poverty, isolation. These become incredibly direct factors in how workers engage or don't engage. Let's say in an EFI farm, and I think if when we see a group of workers that aren't embracing sort of this EFI culture of putting up your hand and saying, I've got a problem and I want to be part of the solution and I want to work with management and I want to like really, lean into the problems and the solutions that I see in front of me. We will often see a group of workers who aren't doing that,
sure. Sure.
and there's some resistance there. And is it that they don't grasp the concepts? Is it an education or training problem? Are they just on it? Do they just have no empathy? And want to improve the workplace for their peers? And all of those answers tend to be wrong. And what we find when we start digging in is perhaps this group of workers all paid recruitment fees to a cartel as part of their recruitment process. So their correct, their rational, and their human response to anything related to work and compensation is pick as fast as you can. That's it.
Yep.
Don't put up your hand. Don't stop picking because there's a food safety problem. Don't stop picking to go and attend a meeting where you can bring your perspective and expertise into a solution. You need to pick, because every berry, in this case, that goes into that clamshell lessens slightly, we hope, the insecurity, the trauma, and the risk that comes with their work-related debt.
Wow.
So I just want to sort of bring that up. One, it shows again sort of the systemic nature of this stuff, that how people are recruited ultimately can manifest in food safety performance in this example. But we then have a responsibility, and the employers have a responsibility of really understanding what is motivating them, what is incentivizing them, and designing that in to how do we make this a better, more productive, more financially resilient, more dignified professional work site.
A holistic view that's maybe never been done before.
I think so. I think a lot of this is new. I mean, I think it's pretty new to think about recruitment and food safety in the same sentence, and to draw and to show that they're correlated. But we'll argue long and hard that they are.
Yeah.
And so let's not just chase, policies and binders to address food safety. Let's really get to the folks that can be our best auditors of food safety, our best implementers of good practices. And that means looking at the whole human, and it means looking at their journey, and it means looking at their history as well. Generational trauma is very real in the workforce of agriculture that we work in. And we've got to start understanding that more, and we've got to start building trauma-informed programming where we can minimize it as a barrier to getting to these better outcomes that we all want.
That's amazing. You've alluded to some pretty powerful stories and kind of touched on the edges, but if you could dig into one of your favorite worker-led initiatives or stories or worker leadership, what would it be?
Yeah, it's the one that I will tell for the 712th time, because I love it, because it talks exactly to that idea of interconnectedness and systems thinking, that worker leadership, that the EFI process is there to open up and make as a tool that employers can use. And this goes back a long time with EFI, but there was a food safety problem on the farm, and the food safety problem was the food safety manager, through nudging, cajoling, and yelling, could not get the wedding bands off the female farm workers. And so that is the food safety problem, right? Potential pathogens being hidden under jewelry that can transfer to market-bound product, right? Food safety problem must have a food safety solution, but the lane that this person had always worked in, there wasn't they couldn't find a working solution to this, because no matter the punishment, and as the temperature rose and the punitive actions increased, rings were still being worn in the field. And so it was only sort of, I think, through desperation and exasperation that the manager went to the leadership team that was still quite new on this farm and said, well, like, help me solve this food safety problem. And so employing the data gathering and problem solving methodology that the leadership team had been introduced to through the EFI training, they went out to the fields and started asking workers, why are you still wearing your rings? And what came back was, because of the prevalence of sexual harassment in the fields, I wear my ring to feel safer. So total mind shift. We can't solve this through a food safety solution. The food safety part of this is an externality of a social problem around sexual harassment. And so by having workers being able to show leadership in gaining the data that's needed, they were able to then, as a leadership team and as a management team and as a workforce, get to that necessary zero tolerance of sexual harassment in the fields, and the rings came off and the food safety problem was solved. So I've always been really inspired by that story, because when we think about the silos that we work in, environmental action is over here and social's over here, food safety is a different thing, and pest management's a different thing, we're really losing the huge opportunity that comes when we start seeing that these things are interconnected, and the social tissue that binds them is this concept of worker leadership, giving them a voice and an agency and a channel to really show leadership on identifying and solving some of these problems.
That's incredibly powerful, Kenton. That's my last structured question. We'll end on that note. Do you have anything you have to share with us that you really feel like I need to know, our audience needs to know, or are you calling in?
Yeah, no, I'm in thinking about how scary all of this is to folks that are considering entering our ecosystem but aren't there yet and haven't got to experience the benefits and the magic that happens. I just want to sort of bring forth another sort of concept that is very atypical for an organization like us, a certification program owner to say, and that's this idea of you're not going to fail the audit. Don't be scared of the audit. Okay, it's a beast of an audit. We're not walking away from that. We're not pretending it's not. For most organizations, it's a 6-person day audit. It's a big audit, but we look at the audit as 6-person days that are dedicated to producing data that isn't otherwise available to the problem-solving process. Right? So we're bringing in 2 other experts, highly trained experts from the outside to see things that you may not be able to see internally, and to present that data back to you in a way where you can create actions and changes that make the business and the workforce more productive. You get to higher quality, you get more resilience and financial sustainability and all these things. So you can absolutely fail the corrective action process. That's when you say, here's the work I need to do, and I'm not either willing or able to do it.
Sure.
But that's a very different thing. And we really just try and bring the temperature down of folks that are entering the audit phase of this to say, this is another form of data gathering. And where you're going to be at the end of this is with this really interesting view of your own operation that you otherwise can't have. And you're going to find that tonally, your certification body and EFI are going to say, great, this is where you're at. We're not going to get punitive for meeting you where you're at. What we're going to do is we're going to support the hell out of you to then improve as in the most effective way, leveraging worker leadership to keep it on theme, so that you then can say, I meet every one of these indicators that I was just audited against.
It's a learning opportunity. It's awesome. It's where the meat is. That's the secret sauce.
There. Yeah. It's continuous improvement in order to get to a compliance goal. But it isn't just, but compliance says, we're going to audit you. And in a lot of cases, this happens all the time in other industries and even other programs. They walk off the farm halfway through the audit because they've detected a condition that they don't like. And so it's very punitive. It's like, this audit's over, go fix this thing. We're saying, no, let's gather all the information we can about this condition. Let's present that back to you in a way where we're going to together be able to get to solution where this goes away forever.
Well, thank you for that encouragement towards anybody who might be interested in taking next steps with EFI. And if you are interested, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much, Kenton, and have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was fun.
All right.